So we're going to talk a little bit. We've had a lot of abstract, sort of overall general talks. We're going to talk a little bit about our experiences with the most recent game that was run, Ghost Patrol. I'm going to start off talking a little bit about the dry side of things, the structure. Specifically, I'm going to touch on, we're going to talk about puzzles, we're going to talk about skipping, and we're going to talk just a little bit about playtesting. And then Brian's going to step up and talk a little bit about our story. So first off, I want to talk a little bit about our overall structure for anyone who didn't actually play in the game. Instead of having one continuous event that was sort of a sort of whole idea, we had 8, 3 to 4, at least our goal was 3 to 4 hours. It didn't always work out that way, but our goal is to have about 8 3 to 4 hour mini events, which were individual ghosts, plus there was a boss ghost at the end. Within each ghost, we had about 6 to 7 puzzles, and with each puzzle was found by using a custom device, which we called a shark, which we had a very clever anagram for, or sorry, acronym for. No idea what it is anymore. But every puzzle, it was a custom-built GPS device that we would use to, you punch in a 4-digit coordinate code, and it would guide you to the place that you were trying to find. It was sort of a neat mechanism, we thought. And so that added up to about, depending on how you count puzzles, there were certain puzzles that were composed of several mini puzzles. It brought us together to about 65 total puzzles, which is a lot. And there were some reasons for that, which I'll get to momentarily. But before we get to that, I just want to talk a little bit about our mission statement, which was a paraphrase. We never actually wrote it down specifically, but the general idea was to create a fun, story-driven game that players of all levels could fully enjoy. What that meant was we really wanted to cater the game not to the top teams, not necessarily to the bottom teams, but try to get an inclusive experience, which meant to some degree we spent more time focusing on how to make the game great for teams that were generally a little bit slower, maybe newbie teams, maybe teams that just weren't as experienced solving puzzles. And a lot of what we did was focused on that demographic. So many puzzles. 65 puzzles it's a lot. It's an extraordinary number of puzzles for a linear game. MIT Mystery Hunt, Microsoft Puzzle Hunt, those types of games have this number of puzzles, and those are solving multiple puzzles at the same time. We had a couple reasons for that. First, we had a really complementary set of skills on Ghost Patrol. We had technical people, we had creative people, we had production people, we had logistical people. We filled a lot of roles, except puzzle making. I put on a couple events before, Jesse's put on a couple events before, but we really didn't have a really deep. We were a broad team, but we weren't a deep team when it came to writing puzzles. So, also, we didn't really have much in the way of location scouts. That was one of our other weaknesses, was we were really excited about producing, about making things, about, building extravagant photo boards that people could put their head through, Ouija boards, converting empty apartments into studios where we could hang light rigs, but we didn't really look for locations. And that kind of bit us a little bit, but it was what it was. So to make the game last the requisite 30 hours, people want to play overnight. That's sort of the idea of a game. That's what a game is playing overnight and at least somewhat into the next day. We were making puzzles that were like, well, this is we had a joke puzzle that we ended up not using, but one of our answers in the game was blood orange, and we had a joke that at one point the puzzle wasn't ready. And we're like, crap, we can't do this, we don't have it, but the way our game worked, we had to have answers for every category of the ghost. I think Brian's going to talk about that a little bit, but each ghost had 7 categories. There was a name, there was a favorite color, there was a favorite flavor, and for the game to work, every ghost had to have some solution for every category in the game. Some of those we just gave you, but we needed to have those. So, one of their puzzles, we had a picture of some blood and a picture of an orange. Blood, orange. Done. So we ended up not using that. Luckily, a lot of our puzzles ended up being better than that, but it was sort of like, that was sort of the level of desperation we felt reduced to because we just felt like we were running out of ideas. So just imagine how many puzzles you need of blood and orange to fill up 30 hours, and you sort of see what we are up against. And additionally, the idea behind a shark was you would have this, the whole thing was based around Ghostbusters, loosely, for several reasons, including trademark infringement and copyright problems. We decided not to actually go with Ghostbusters, but loosely inspired by Ghostbusters. And they had those cool little devices, their PKE meters, that they would go around town, seeing how far away ghosts were. And we really wanted to do that. And through several play tests, we discovered that they do not work in the car very well. They just get driven all over town. Like, it's just a pain in the ass using the car. So we wanted to have several sections where people could go around on foot. And that we felt the best way to do that was to have, shorter puzzles that people felt, so it could feel like the shark was really integrating experience. You'd solve a puzzle, you'd use the shark, you'd go somewhere else, you'd solve a puzzle, you use the shark. You really wanted the shark to feel like not something that was tacked on to go like 5 or 6 places, but really like, wow, we are using this thing to get everywhere that we're going. So that came out a lot in our play testing. We're going to go into playtesting right here. Having so many puzzles allowed us to be flexible with the skipping.
No skipping.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Let's go to the next slide. Don't call it skipping. Skipping was a point of huge contention with us. Because we wanted to cater the game to people of all skill levels, Lowkey is a team that is often towards the back of the pack. and Desert Taxi is the other part of this. Is we rarely come out in the front of the pack, and one of our really most important goals was to make this, everyone who played, especially the teams that were not going to get to see every little aspect of the game, felt like they were experiencing the entire story of Ghost Patrol. And there was a lot of ideas about how we were going to do this. The sort of, one of our more vocal members insisted that we would not skip at all. We cannot skip teams because then they'll miss out on parts of it. We go to, games, we go to Shintekis, whatever, and you come back to the end party and you talk to people and you say, oh my gosh, did you see this puzzle? It was so great. No. And that's just kind of a crappy feeling. So we looked, like, is there any way to do this that we can go around not skipping teams over puzzles? Then the answer is no. So long story short. Long story short, the answer is no.
Those ideas don't work.
Right. We talked about doing bonus puzzles where we'd have puzzles that were not part of the main storyline. You do your storyline. If you're too far ahead, you go off and solve like a little mini case, like a single puzzle that was, someone's TV is broken. And you solve the puzzle, and the answer was, it's a broken TV. It's not a ghost. That's one of your inside jokes for GC that really didn't end up working. Right. We talked about skipping over complete ghosts. Like, okay, well, when you go to a ghost, you really experience the story for that ghost completely. But then if you're falling behind, you just skip over a storyline altogether. We didn't want that either because, well, partly because we had a final section of the game that was a boss ghost that incorporated elements from the entire race, and we really felt like that was our way of tying the whole thing together. So it didn't make sense for someone to do a boss puzzle if they had missed part of the race. So we couldn't do that. So we eventually settled on a system where within each ghost, you could skip some of the puzzles, depending on how you're doing. And we had to come up with a moderately complex timing scheme, whereas depending on, we had a certain time that we wanted ghosts to start, we had a certain time that we wanted ghosts to end, based on sunrise, sunset, how late certain businesses were open, when we wanted people to be at certain places, where we wanted people to eat dinner. So it worked out pretty well. We ended up having this, we decided every team has to see the first puzzle of every ghost, every team has to see the last puzzle of every ghost. And a couple reasons for that, mostly involving with how the shark works and capturing the ghost. It was based on being in a physical location. And after that, depending on your time, you could just do whatever. But all you needed to beat a ghost was the first puzzle and the last puzzle.
So we made those puzzles. So we tried to set it up so that those ones were also the easiest puzzles. So even if you were a super slow team, that first puzzle and that last puzzle, by gosh, you should be able to solve those. You should be able to solve those. You will not be skipped over a ghost, and you will stay with the game because if you're here, you should be able to solve at least those two.
At least those two. And really, it worked out for the most part. Right. Even in the places where we decided to have that last puzzle where it's going to be easy and you have to get there and you're going to solve it no matter what. We had 3 puzzles for one of our ghosts that you had to go there and solve at the same time. It's like, oh, that wasn't a very good idea because you're basically seeing half the ghost at one location and you've got to do it all. And that slowed some people down, but overall it felt like it worked pretty well. So, playtest. More than just a free ride. I playtested Paparazzi, and I playtested Hogwarts. And those were some of the best experiences I ever had. Well, and playing games was fun too. But, but really, playtesting was phenomenal because you feel like you're part of it, but you're still getting to have fun. You're playing for free, usually. And often maybe game control doesn't like hearing this, and I certainly don't like hearing it, but when you're in a playtest, it's a little bit less pressure. It almost feels like you can have a little bit more fun in a playtest because you're not it's not that competitive, we're in the game, we have to win. It's like, hey, there's some puzzles that's, if it's broken, it's probably game control's fault. It's not our fault. And, we can tell them about it. And, I would really encourage anybody who's interested in putting on a game, find out who's running the next game and be part of the playtest process. Be part of the full playtest. Let game control know that you're interested in running a game and you want to see how it works. Volunteer for the playtest. Sometimes playtest spots can be contested for, but be part of the playtest process and then volunteer during the game. See what's going on in game control. See what the room is going on, answering hit lines, putting volunteers out to various locations. It's really enlightening, and if something goes wrong, it's not your fault. You're just the playtester. You're just there, and you can see it and improve on it. It's really a great experience. So anyway, we had 2 full day, when I say full day, it's 1 day playtest that we ran for 12 to 15 hours. 1 overnight playtest and several scattered living room playtests. We broke the game into ghosts, and so for each of our playtests, we ran a different section of the game. We ran 3 ghosts, then we ran another 3 ghosts, and then our last couple ghosts we didn't ever test separately. We just sort of rolled it into the big playtest, which is one of our regrets, but timing being what timing is, we just ran out of time. We got a lot of great puzzle feedback. We got a lot of feedback on the shark, on how it was working, how it wasn't working. That was probably one of the most valuable things we got out of our playtest was people saying, you know what, it really sucks to use the shark under these particular circumstances. And so that went through a lot of refinement, and we had a better game for it.
Yeah, so that one was really, that first one was really early on. We had one day playtest basically as quick as we could because we had a lot of gameplay mechanics as well as that shark to test out, and we learned so many things we were doing wrong from that one playtest. We changed so much about the game just based on that first one, and luckily we did it really nice and early. So,
yeah, for that first playtest, we had people driving, from one end of San Francisco to the other, just using a shark, and it was a nightmare. If anyone who played the game might try to do that, they would know. The other thing that the playtest was really just incredible for, especially for our particular dynamic, was it gave us that kick in the pants that made us get stuff done. We were meeting a lot. I mean, we were not slacking per se, but we were meeting early on. We were meeting every other week, and then pretty soon we started meeting once a week. As we got close to our first playtest, oh crap, we're running behind. Let's meet twice a week just for this first playtest, and we'll dial it back again. And we never did. From that point on, we met twice a week for the rest of the game, which was about 6, 8 months before the game. No? Anyway, it was a while before the game, a couple months. But basically it forced us to say, okay, we're running the Trading Ghost, we're running the Pirate Ghost, and we're running the Chinatown Ghost in a month. We have to get stuff done for this playtest, otherwise we're going to miss our chance. And it really forced us to just come together as a group and get stuff done. Without those playtests, I really feel like we would have been like, well, we still have a little bit of time, we have a little bit of time, let's talk some more, let's really see how we're feeling, let's talk about skipping some more. And so the playtest was just incredible for that. One problem was we're still, feeling our way out. We did not get as much hard-solving data as we should have. We rode around. We had so much fun at the playtest. We saw people actually experiencing our creations. We saw people like, oh my gosh, we're out there. Like, you're doing this. This is incredible. Like, and we got really excited and giddy. And we sort of like watched what was going on and had idea like, oh, remember that, remember that, remember that, remember that. But we didn't focus. We didn't like take hard notes. We didn't say, okay, you started this puzzle this time, you ended the puzzle this time, you got stuck here, and we regretted that as we came up to it. Like, how long did that puzzle take? Well, it took that team a little while. They kind of got stuck, but and we also ran into situations, and I was probably as guilty, more guilty than anyone else, where a team would get really stuck on a puzzle. And then I would say, well, yeah, but other teams won't get stuck. Yeah. It's just, that was just an anomaly. Trust your playtesters. You're using them for a reason. Sure, there's going to be situations where one team's going to solve really fast, one team's going to solve really slow. But really, trust your playtesters. Like, they're there for a reason. We had several playtests. We got a lot of good feedback for it. The game really improved for it, but I needed to be a little bit more understanding of where the bottlenecks in our puzzles were. And on that note, next, hunt me down. Like we've been saying all night long, very open community. Everybody wants to help new teams that are out there. We just ran a game. We have lots of sort of stories to share. So if you want any help, talk to me. If I don't know an answer, I can point you to someone else on our team. We had about 8 or 9 core GC, and then we had about another 5 or 6 people that were on the periphery that were helping out a lot towards the end of the process. So we've got a lot of information, and as does everyone else that's out here. So deBeer@gmail.com. Write me if you have any questions. And Brian's going to talk a little bit about story of Ghost Patrol.
Oh, good. Yay! Just like the old seminar. All right. So I'm going to talk a little bit about your exciting adventure as a Ghost Patrol franchise was over ages ago. Funny. Nice. Next slide. Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about story and gameplay of Ghost Patrol, which some people might not find that interesting. It's what's interesting to me, so I could talk about it forever, but I'll try to go as quick as I possibly can. No, but I'm going as quick as I possibly can. Here's the overview of basically the story structure that we created Ghost Patrol with. Number 1, hey, let's do something different. That's, I assume, the doomed phrase that a lot of GCs utter very early on, and we were no exception. I only bring it up because really that was probably a really important part for us as far as the decisions that we made going forward. Most of us on the team, it was really important that if we weren't going to do a good game, which, we're very new and we had no idea what kind of game we were actually going to create, at least we're going to do something very different. So I think that it's important to note that that's what we started with. The second thing that we went with, this was an idea that, I felt very strongly about and we all started to get on board about, is puzzles are somehow not just puzzles specials. This is what happens when you make your keynotes in the car on the way over to the summit. Anyway, puzzles are somehow not just puzzles. And this goes with the idea that there's always games that have really strong storylines, whether they take their story from a work of fiction that's already been done, or they're inventing some sort of story world. Whenever you get down to actually solve a puzzle, there's always this disconnect that even if it's really heavily themed, the puzzle itself is still just a puzzle. It's a puzzle and there's a story. Is there any way that we can make this puzzle feel like there's a reason that you're sitting there and decoding something? Is there a reason that you're sitting in your van as a team and trying to make sense of this complicated thing? We'll get more into that later. Number 2, taking this a step further. The story is brought about through the puzzles. Now, the idea is that, again, if you have a really strong story, half the time in the games, you're going to have a story, and it's going to be basically a storyline here, and then some puzzles. And if by nobody's fault, if it's not absolutely important, you're going to disregard the story altogether because you have so much to focus on and you're being competitive and you appreciate the GC for putting a story together. But when it comes down to it, if you can ignore a bunch of flavor text or reading, you're just going to put it out of your mind as quickly as possible. But what if the story itself was brought to you through the puzzles, which actually might be seen as sort of a convoluted way to force you to enjoy the story, because you solve the puzzle and ha-ha, you also learn part of the story. And then if you take that a step further, and again, I think it's really important to note that I never will claim that any of these were 100% or even a 50% success in our game. But these are the things that we were thinking of as we planned this game, and it really affected the gameplay overall. Taking this one step forward, the story is such a big part of the puzzles that they are not solvable without following the story. So again, if you take it to the point that there is a storyline going on, and your insight into how to solve this puzzle is actually in the ongoing story, you have to pay attention to the story in order to solve puzzles, which is what you're there to do. Again, maybe forcing teams to pay attention to the story. And again, this one was really hard, and I don't think we got nearly as far with this one as we could have. But things are things. Next slide. Okay, so storyline versus story. This is just something I threw up there just to so we get on the same page as far as the terms that I'm using. Storyline versus story. We never had a strong storyline in Ghost Patrol. So the people who played in the game, as far as what you were, a storyline would be something that has a beginning, middle, and end. You start a game, and it's like, you guys are a bunch of detectives hot on the case, and you need to go to this location. The next thing that happens would be the middle. Oh no, something either goes horribly wrong, or the people you were working for are actually the enemy, would be the middle part. And then the end is always, and then we try to wrap it up with some big boss battle, which is exactly what we did in the end. We honestly didn't care that much about that storyline, and our game basically didn't have an overall storyline. What it did have, what we were trying to get across was story. Oh, and the other thing is that, let me just point this out. One of the things that we steered clear of a storyline for is that a 30-hour storyline is really hard to tell. I mean, part of the team is going to sleep at certain parts. It's complicated to try to remember something that happened 25 hours ago if it's going to affect what's actually going on the next morning. So trying to tell one cohesive story for 30 hours straight is just really, really hard, and we didn't have any interest in trying to do it. Storyline is the beginning, middle, end. Story is just the world you create. So when I talk about story, I talk more about story being the ideas that we came up with, which allowed us to give you puzzles in sort of a real-world environment, so that we created this idea of capturing ghosts in a seminar, which allowed you to do puzzles which were actually helping you capture ghosts. Like the story of the teams capturing ghosts is a story that I'm talking about, and trying to keep that as immersive as possible. And it's not, not necessarily the same thing as a storyline. And then story is a gameplay mechanic. Talking about it was important for us to have a strong story. I just put this in here because anytime you're going to choose a story, it's going to affect how your game plays out. Because if you're building a story, that basically means that you're going to be building a fictional world, or what sci-fi... Yeah, world building. I just learned that term. Sci-fi novelists will refer to as world building, where you're actually just trying to create some kind of real-life environment where people are actually going to be able to solve puzzles. And whatever you decide is or isn't the reality of that situation is going to decide what you're actually going to allow your teams to do in the game. So it really becomes like the gameplay becomes the story, and they're, interswappable. Maybe that's a bad bullet point, but anyway. So going back to the 30-hour story, is that the first thing that was really great about this game that just sort of evolved naturally is 9 small stories. Rather than trying to do one big, long story, we have our story that's going on, which is people catching ghosts. And then within that, we try to tell 9 little, simple stories of the ghost life. And those are, that was actually really great. There's a lot of great things that came about from trying to tell 9 small stories as opposed to one big one. First of all, which isn't here, but first of all, it's just nice because it's much easier to get a very heavy theme and to get a real sense of the story starting and finishing and keeping all the puzzles within that story line going within the same theme if you only have to do it for 3 or 4 hours as opposed to 30. It's an easy way to divide up responsibilities, which became really cool, and we had a good amount of success with it. Is that it's just a nice way to get everybody on GC involved, because we're not telling one big story, we're telling 9 little stories. We have 9 members of GC, let's say. Each person can take ownership of a big section of the game. That's my section of the game. I want these type of themed puzzles. I want it to be played out this way. And I really think it's interesting that we have a forlorn a bearded lady from a circus for part of this game. And I'm going to take responsibility for sort of making sure that the creative things, creatively and cohesively things work enough for that part of the game. And keeps things fresh, because you can still have a heavy theme on, this part of the game, but then as soon as you're done with that 3 to 4 hours later, you're starting something that is essentially a brand new game. We keep to our big game mechanic, our big story, but it's changing ghost to ghost. So next. I put this one in here too. I think it's an important thing that to bring up, we're talking about storyline versus story and how these things are brought about. No role playing. That was actually something that all of us agreed on really early on. It's something, and there's a number of reasons that we decided that we didn't want role playing in our game, and probably just from personal experience. But number one, some folks really don't like it. It's tough.
On GC or by players?
What do you mean?
Game controller players don't like it.
Oh, players don't like it.
Okay.
Some people, but it's not so much that some people don't like it, as some people really don't like it. And it's not that you want to put a bunch of people in a situation where all of a sudden, for one reason that you thought would be really cool, all of a sudden they are kind of not having a good time or whatever. And you never know exactly what to do. One of the important things is that I always wanted people to feel like they didn't have to remove themselves from what they were doing to know what to do next. So with role playing, essentially the idea is that you're going to come up to an actor, and the actor is going to be delivering lines to you, and you have to respond to them in a certain way. And you're not really sure if you're responding as yourself or you're responding as the character, and you get a little confused. In this game, I wanted people to, what I put here, play to our strengths, which is, in a lot of ways, all of us are introverted xenophobes, and all we want to do, we want to grab the little puzzle, and we want to go back to our van and solve away with people that we know personally and not have to talk to anybody. And if that's what people want to do, then let's build a story or a gameplay that allows them to do just that. You're a specialist in the field. Things are weird. Nobody is here to help you. You can take this and only you know what to do with it. Do whatever you want, and you can go away. Maybe a bad slide, but that was something I threw in there because this was something that we really all kind of agreed on. Next. So this is, getting back to one of the things I said in the overview, puzzles are not puzzles. So this was one of the things that we were working on really hard. Puzzles are not puzzles basically just means that we wanted to give the puzzles, create a reality that allows for puzzles and try to stick to it. In ours, we basically had ghosts as our reality. So we had to, for some reason or another, come up with a world or a scheme that allowed you to solve puzzles, which is essentially taking this object, decoding a message from it, only it made sense in this reality that we created. And we could make the rules of the reality whatever we wanted, but once we came up with it, we wanted to stick to it as strictly as possible. Maybe I don't even know why we wanted to do that, but that's what we wanted to do. to try to keep the puzzles as immersive as possible, make them not puzzles, but make them actually something more. And again, I'm sure this is something that every GC plays with the idea with every time that they're coming up with any puzzle, but it was something very important to us. So anyway, our reality was ghosts. Number one, great thing about ghosts are a great subject to try to base this a puzzle-solving reality on, because number one, ghosts are known to leave mysterious messages. Well, that's fantastic. That sounds a lot like what we do. We find mysterious messages. Number two, they're just sort of spooky and weird. You're not really sure what they're going to do next. Great. This ghost knows Braille. This ghost... this ghost, whatever. And then thirdly, they're invisible. They can be right in front of you and you don't even know it. So as long as you don't try to have a person running around with a sheet on to look like a ghost, people can really just sit there and believe that a ghost made this puzzle. Sure, why not, if you bill it right. One of the things that we stuck to is ghosts write puzzles, we don't. And application process is a part of it. This is just something that we did. Again, maybe we went too far with it, but it was important for us. It actually was a lot of discussion in our application process, because how do we give you a puzzle to solve as the application process if ghosts are the one who write puzzles? Did a ghost infect our machine and you have to help us with it? Well, you're coming to a training seminar, so you wouldn't know how to hunt ghosts yet. So that's how ours turned into sort of an application skills set test, where it's like we tried to make tests that were that were puzzles, but maybe not necessarily as puzzly as anything else, just so we never had to go against our own reality that we don't write puzzles. Like, we're not here to write you puzzles. The ghosts write the puzzles. You go find them. And secondly, we couldn't have any hidden puzzles in our applications, because if we're giving you a test, who hid the puzzle in it? And how does that make any sense in the ghost world? So I'd only bring this up as an example as the weird conversations that we had as far as trying to figure out how does this reality that we have go all the way through the game process from application to end party. Secondly, is trying to make puzzles feel like they're not just puzzles. Give the puzzles goal-oriented feel. And this is just speaking strictly to the fact that we gave you categories to solve for each ghost. So what you would do is that for each puzzle that you got, it would solve to one piece of information that you could put into your calculator that would help you trap a ghost. Now, basically the idea is that a ghost leaves mysterious messages. We have a device that if you can decode the message, it's going to help you capture a ghost. Your job is to capture a ghost. Therefore, puzzle solving is part of it. It's part of sort of a goal-oriented experience where capturing the ghost is the end result. Whatever. That was our idea. Make the puzzles feel real. That just goes to just talking about how, again, the story sort of drove all of our gameplay ideas. This is why we had tried to have so many non-paper puzzles, just because it's much more interesting and believable to come into a haunted room and have an installation where a ghost has affected something and there's a hidden message in it than having a bunch of paper puzzles printed out. But obviously, of course, we had to start printing out puzzles at some point. There was just no way we could go through all 65 puzzles with just clay bones and things like that. And then slime collection, which I thought was a bullet that I took off. But basically, I put that in there because puzzles, just the idea that we were trying to give them something to do that literally had nothing to do with solving puzzles. Like, you're not always solving puzzles. There's other things that you're doing as part of your job. This is a task that you're doing, blah, blah, blah. Okay, what's next? Creating a theme, and this was probably the last slide that I'll go with. Creating a theme, this is just I'm talking about specifically how we went about generating the puzzles that we did. So each puzzle is part of the small ghost storyline, whatever. Came up with the storyline first to get the solve words. So literally what we did when we started to actually put this game together is that I or somebody would come up with an idea for a ghost. Once we came up with an idea for a ghost that seemed like it might have some sort of puzzle writing legs to it, I'm going late, we wrote out literally a storyline. Here's what this ghost was doing on its last day. Then this ghost met this stranger and they died. Blah, blah, blah. This is their life story. And since each of our puzzles solved to a category which is about that ghost's life, just knowing that ghost's life story, we had the solve words. That was basically it. This ghost died on this date. Their favorite flavor was this because of something. This is how they died, and whatever the other categories were. So all of them actually started out as a story, and we built the puzzles from that. Which brings me to this, strong themes at the expense of strong puzzles. Because as you can imagine, what immediately happens is that you have a puzzle that, number one, has to be in the theme of this ghost, whatever it is. Duplicity, circus, piratey stuff. Number two, the puzzle already has a solve word that is basically unchangeable that you have to write your puzzle to. And number three, it has to feel like it's a part of all the other puzzles in that ghost that might be written by other people. What happens is that you can write a puzzle that fits all those categories, but you might come up with a really elegant and interesting puzzle on its own that you can't possibly use in our game. So the puzzles that we came up with, what I'm trying to say is that we're not necessarily going to be the strongest puzzles ever, which was a bit of contention because I personally said, that's great. That's fine. I don't even care if there are strong puzzles in my game. As long as they fit a theme, they're great. And you can imagine that's not what everybody on GC would agree with. Yeah, we can run a puzzle with no good or a game with no good puzzles in it at all. What's the big deal? But so again, there was no way to do it without the expense of the puzzles, and whether you accept that or not is just going to decide what's going on. What went wrong, and I'll go through these really quickly because, I think there's a ton more slides, but again, I could just talk about this stuff forever. Very hard to write puzzles with so many constraints. Just to give you a real-world experience. What? Constrictions. Constrictions, yes. Is that the puzzles were actually, the theme wasn't hard to keep up with. It wasn't hard to write another puzzle that had to do with a duplicitous bipolar character. What was always the hardest was the actual word, because you could come up with a really great mechanic that fit the theme of the ghost, and then actually fitting it to that particular word. Like as you're writing a puzzle, the actual word that you can create with it comes down to, well, I can only use these 9 letters of the entire alphabet. The word was the hardest part. The themes were actually really easy. Like it's almost a leaping off point. It's almost easier if somebody gives you something to go with. Here, write a puzzle that's based on these 2 things. Oh, great, I can do that. But solves were always the hardest. Multiple puzzle solving to just one category. We'll skip all of that. Expectations. This one, very briefly, is that we... one of the things that occurred to us very early on, or occurred to me very early on, expectations refers to, number one, that the game is something. It has driving, it has puzzle solving, it goes overnight. And teams have certain things that they've already decided are part of the game, and you can't really change their mind about that. We probably could have pushed these themes a lot further if we had decided that we're not running the game. But again, it has to have certain elements of that, and there's just no way around it. And for better or worse, I'm not complaining about it. I'm just saying, at some point we had to start doing things that teams expected, or else it could totally fall apart. Installations are hard to work in this type of game. Again, it would have been nice if almost every puzzle was an installation just so it would feel haunted, but it doesn't work in the game. You can't have 22 teams running through the same location for every single puzzle as an installation. It just doesn't work. Never going to be 100% immersive. This is something that I was mentioning earlier. We tried as hard as we could, but again, everybody's going to realize that this is a puzzle. It's not actually a haunted item, and we consider ourselves particularly crafty people when it comes to building these things, and still there's no way we're ever going to build something that doesn't look like a puzzle. So there's always going to be a leaping off point where you've decided, I really wanted to push this theme and make this theme as real or immersive as possible, but it's never going to be 100%, and you have to accept that and just run with it. Is there another slide? Oh, and then, sorry, activities didn't always play into our theme. This was a problem that our game was actually suffering because we had a lot of puzzles but not activities. We love having activities in the game. That's part of the fun, but how do you justify doing activities as busting ghosts. There's basically no way to do it. We wrote that out when we wrote our gameplay, so we had to take leaps and say, whatever, this time you have to throw a Frisbee at a thing to bust a ghost. I don't know, because we needed people to do things. It's just fun. Non-paper puzzles takes lots of time to make. I just wanted to throw that one in there because the logistics of trying to create 65 non-paper puzzles, the logistics of literally producing them one at a time was something that, even though I knew I was prepared for it, I was not prepared for it. It takes so much more time. Every time somebody wrote a puzzle, near the end, you wrote a puzzle and it was literally something you just print out on colored paper and it was done. It was like you were a miracle worker. It's like, that's perfect. Well, I can print out 20 copies right now and the puzzle's done forever. I never have to look at it again. So this is so obvious. I just put it up there because it is really, really, really true. Puzzles were interdependent, no problem. Guessable solves, whatever. If all puzzles give you a piece of the story, then nothing is skippable. Very early on, that was like the thing I was talking about where every puzzle would play off of itself and you had to know the full story in order to actually solve the puzzles. So you couldn't possibly skip one because it would give you information you needed for the rest of the puzzles. You can't do that unless nothing is skippable. And again, something had to be skippable, so we basically remove that whole idea from the game. There was never really an idea except for the boss ghost at the very end where you had to use the ghost's story as you're in to try to solve this puzzle, which was barely necessary anyway. I think we'll all admit that was almost barely a success. That was sort of the sad last remnant of this big gameplay idea that I was pushing from the very beginning. We basically got rid of it entirely, and that was the very end of it. Logistics are a son of a bitch. And I have nothing to say about that bullet point. I think it speaks for itself. Well, I will say, it's just, I only put that up there because, again, you know, a lot of grand ideas that we wanted to do and came up with, even though we were very, very prepared for what it means to have a puzzle in a location that somebody has to staff and can't be illegal and has to be a place that we have permission to go, and they have to do that 9 or 8 times per ghost. Even though I understood the logistics of that, once you actually start calling people and say, you need to stand here, once you start talking to park rangers and say, can we stand here, all of a sudden, your gameplay ideas just fall apart and form together to what is actually realistic. Again, very obvious thing, but I had to put it up there because it was a big deal to me. So, man, I think that's all we got. Nice. Anyway, so that's all we had to talk about. Questions?
Okay, first I want to say I loved your game, and I love that you guys tried some new things. And I really liked the sort of 9 small things all put together. That was really great, not just from a player's perspective, but also I can see how that's helpful on your side. I was really interested in your expectations bullet point that you hit on briefly. So, what are some of the things that you would have liked to have done but you couldn't do because you wanted to conform to what players were expecting?
You want me to say it? So yeah, if we went into that specifically, and we're talking big idea here. Like I'm, the classic big idea guy with no follow through. Like I have these ideas and they're going to be amazing. Literally, can we have a game where teams don't, for 30 hours straight, don't drive anywhere? Can we have a game where you don't solve a puzzle so much as you start to infer answers or just try to build a story? Can we have a game where every location is somebody's house and none of them are fun? None of them are go to the beach. None of them are go to this interesting, park or statue. Like, people expect that they're going to have some adventure that involves driving around and seeing some sights and getting out of their car and doing legwork. And if we could, I'll give you the real example. The beta version of this game, meaning only in my head, was literally we rented out the hotel, and you would go to the hotel, and you would get a dossier for a ghost, and you would go to somebody's house. Every ghost is a haunted house, and that house would be a haunted house, like decked up for Halloween. And you'd walk in, and there'd be like strobe lights and crap all over the place, but each one of those little things was actually also a puzzle. So it felt like you were just in this haunted environment, but you were solving all of the puzzles all at once. And once you had that done, you'd go back to the hotel, you'd get another dossier, and you'd go to another location. On top of that, it was all a scramble. So all locations were open at all the times. So you'd just be handed one based on how many teams were already there to sort of deal with the mess. The problem with that being, again, no puzzles are skippable. Everybody has to solve every puzzle at a location before they can move on. And how do you deal with that? People don't necessarily want to sit in somebody's house for 3 hours. And if they're not having fun, they're going to really not have a fun time. And if they're expecting things like a race, or they're expecting to see other teams and think that they're doing something linear, that totally doesn't work at all. So for the sense that teams expect a linear-ish ride, they expect to be able to compete with each other, they expect to have to go at least somewhere farther away and see a beach or see something interesting-ish. Like I said, our location scouting was terrible. We only just, we happen to live next to San Francisco, so it's like, well, there's nice things in San Francisco, so we'll use all of them again. If you really start to totally reconstruct the idea of the game and come up with something totally different, then we could have done a lot, more sort of out there interesting things. But, but getting back to that, actually, sorry, I'm answering for a long time. But more than that is that if you try something completely new and it totally sucks, and you don't know if it totally sucks until game day, then you've wasted a year of your life. And building on at least somewhat of a model that has a proven success and understanding that this is how games work and this is, works. We love these games, so why are we trying to do something completely different? You're going to at least have the framework for something that people are going to enjoy. It's not just going to be a complete disaster day one. So that kind of stuff.
Going back to Greg, I just wanted to say you hit on something in there in the play testing. I have to agree that real life conditions are absolutely key in play testing, and usually our final, we do different sort of play test style than I know a couple other teams do. We do like multiple play tests of the same clue and iterate in between. And that last opportunity we get before we go live with it or put it to bed or whatever is the most miserable condition we can usually construe for that particular clue. And we've done clues where we force a team in their car in the middle of a cold, windy night, and we give them 1 or 2 pencils that they have to find, and you shove them in a car and you say, good luck, and it doubles the time to solve. That's all it takes. It's still, like 9 at night. They're not tired, but it doubles the time to solve. And so for anyone listening, that real life thing, you've got to take it into account when you're doing your timeline. It matters.
Yeah.
I kind of want to add one notion to that, which is a little bit of a tangent, but if you're figuring out how long your game is going to take, you can have all the solve data in the world, but that's not going to tell you how long the event will take, because there's this intangibles category, and that really is the biggest difference between the fastest teams and the slowest teams. The solve times on puzzles, pretty different, but it's the intangibles that are huge, because some teams will never stop. They will pee out the window. They will bring all their food with them, and they're just go, 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 go. And other teams, they'll go to a bar for a couple hours. You just never know, and you can't know how that's gonna play out until the game actually runs, and that can make a huge difference in your spread. So.
Yeah, I'll address both of those points. We did do a lot of testing in ideal conditions. Our first 2 full-day play tests were, start bright and early at 11 o'clock, and and go until we get through 3 ghosts, and people were alert and happy. It wasn't till pretty, not at the last minute, but fairly late in the process that we became more aware of the concept of stupid o'clock. Which is, when you're doing an overnight game, you do not have ideal conditions. It's the middle of the night, you are exhausted, you have half your team working, the team that is working at 25% capacity, they are stupid. And we didn't really account for that at first, and we made adjustments, but we really should have had more rough playtest conditions. And it's hard to put your playtesters through that. It's hard to say, hey, why don't you come over and, meet us at 3 a.m. and solve this puzzle. It's hard. It's hard. And Brent, what was your point? Right, the intangibles, right. So we sat down, a couple weeks before the game, and then the day before the game as well, and sort of scheduled out the entire game. It's going to take, if basically our metric was if you knew how to solve this puzzle ahead of time, if you already knew the answer, you knew all the steps, you knew exactly what to do, how long would it actually take you to go through the just process of every layer of the puzzle? I see this clearly, I'm going to enter in these letters, and it's, I know what to do, and we're going to go to the next step, and we're going to put them in alphabetical order, and then we're going to, put them in the order of the third character killed in the Shakespeare play, and we're done. So we're like, okay, the absolute fastest time anyone could possibly solve this puzzle, and we're going to say, okay, somebody's going to do that. Somebody is just going to look at this puzzle and read it like a book and be done. And we said, okay, it's going to take this long. Yeah, jumbo jet. And so like, okay, so we're going to make this our absolute fastest time you could get through the race. Great. Now, not one team isn't going to be the fastest on every single puzzle, right? So we'll put a little slop time in, so they're going to screw up somewhere, right? So we'll have it like an hour after this goes, an hour after this goes, and it should work out fine, right? No. There's a team that will solve it as fast as possible for every single puzzle.
But it's okay, because then they get ahead and they fix all the broken stuff.
Right, and they get ahead and they fix all of our broken puzzles, and it's wonderful.
You make up a clue on the fly to slow them down.
Sometimes you do have to make clues on the fly, and we talked about that. We had Ian tell us on our team, and we said, you know what, Ian, why don't you just stand out in the field and make up puzzles as teams show up? And it almost came to that.
And he made 2.
And on the fly. Any other questions?
If we didn't make it obvious, you should have Ian tell us on your GC if you want to succeed. I think that's something we've all learned.
You mentioned expectations, and I would just say that if you want to innovate in the game, I think you should just be transparent about it so the teams know what they're getting before they give you their money.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what.
Expectations beforehand.
Yeah, that's what I was where we were getting at. Where I love what you guys are doing with the blog, and we were talking about doing something similar because it's like if we're going to go so far left field, we have to warn people that this is what we're doing so they know ahead of time. And it just sort of got shot down because number one, we figured even if we told them what it was going to be, every single team would still sign up anyway because they'd be like, whatever, it's the one game of the year or whatever it was. You know what I mean? We had that problem going for us. And number two, even when we were accepting applications, we still hadn't hammered down our gameplay, and we weren't quite sure what we could tell them if we were being transparent about it. Like you said, we could tell them our opinions and our thoughts, but it was we were seesawing in the gameplay day to day anyway.
Yeah, we had a lot of conversations about let's tell teams right front before they even apply. This is going to be this type of game. This is going to be a beginner game, an expert game. This is going to be a game where there's a lot of driving, there's no driving. Whatever our game was going to be, let's tell them right up front so we wouldn't have people applying that didn't want to play or have teams that are really excited about it, but we just didn't know. We really were making, we're like, let's run a game. Great, we're going to run a game. We had a informal go or no go. We didn't officially say go or no go, but we all were pretty much on board and said, yes, we're going to make this happen, but we didn't know how. So
I think even when you don't know the answers, one of the things that's important to share is what you're discussing.
I think that's really true. I think
because
that's
you may not know what you're gonna. You may not know that you're gonna have 9 mini stories inside your big story. But the fact that you spent that much time thinking and talking about story is something you can convey to a team. And if you end up doing something so different that's related to story, and it's not what people were expecting, at least you warned them ahead of time.
Right.
It's a lot harder for them to come back later and say, "Wait, why'd I give you my money?" And that's really what motivated us, right? Players are paying to play in your game. And yeah, you're putting in a lot of hard time and effort into creating that environment, but if you're not doing it for the players, who are you doing it for? Yeah. Right? Like the part of Curtis's letter that rung the most true was that piece exactly.
That's one that I get. I reread that one like 3 months before the game happened. I was like, oh right.
Yeah, exactly.
Players.
So
are we actually giving them what they want?
Yeah, I think expectations is a great thing to address right from the get-go, and even if it's okay to say we have no idea what we're doing, but these are the things we're thinking about. It helps to set those expectations.
Yeah, I think it's might be a little bit easier too as a more experienced game control to do that, to expose yourselves in that way. It's a lot harder when you're running your first or second. It was either our first or second depending on
That's
who
a
you
good
were
point.
on the
Just for
team.
us too, it was our first time doing it. We had never experienced anybody being very open about their game process beforehand. So we'd never seen it, so we didn't even really think of doing it. Like, we don't tell people what we're doing ahead of time. The best thing we could do really was to try to put that into our application process as best we could. We were like, well, okay, what we'll do is we'll make the application process silly and creative and say, okay, creativity is the most important thing to us. This is what we're about. You tell us what you're about, and we'll see if it's a match. And we try to pick out who was actually into doing the creative stuff instead of who was into doing the gaming stuff, and maybe we could come up with a match that way. But if we did it again, that would probably be a better idea to actually say outright, this is what we're trying to accomplish, and are you
I think
interested in that?
yeah, it's really fair to say, like, you know, it's our first game, and we're copying what other people do when we don't know what to do. It's like, well, they don't talk about their game. We're not supposed to talk about our game, right? Right.
Yeah.
This must be important for some reasons, but
I want to know, let's see, you gave away all your sharks to the players at the end, didn't you? How hard and expensive were they to make?
oh boy.
Because, I'm asking because I think you guys came across a really strong framework, and I would love to see another Ghost Patrol, even if you didn't run it.
Okay, there's two
We
different.
would- we
yeah,
would
I would love if you would do it,
sure.
but you've meant...
There's two different questions there. It's the technical aspect of the shark, and then Ghost Patrol as a franchise. So Jesse was our shark master, so he can talk to you.
The sharks ended up being around $150 each, but
Yeah.
they were
That's why the game was so expensive.
the revision that you guys all had. They had enough problems that I didn't want to see them ever again. It would be a lot easier to make it a second time. It took a lot of work the first time because, like, I've never done any industrial design before. The housing actually was more work than anything else for me. But you know, the electronics, everything was like, if I were doing it again, it would be different enough that I would want to do it differently and redo it.
Yeah, it'd be easier to rebuild than reuse.
Yeah.
That shark basically, it lasted that day, and good for it. But
It's
done.
almost impossible to open them up without breaking them because they're basically glued together. Like, you might be able to change the batteries. Reprogramming it would be a lot of X-Acto work and so on.
And it was one of our concepts during the original planning was that we would say at the end of the event, okay, now you're all Ghost Patrol franchises, go out and run your own game, we'll help you in any way we can. We didn't do anything with the end game instead. But yeah, anything that we do have, any of the schematics or anything like that, if anybody wants to use it, they're more than welcome. And we'll help anybody who wants to run Ghost Patrol, but we don't want to ever do it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, we're done talking, but yeah, bottom line, anybody wants to run a Ghost Patrol, we'd love to see it happen again.
We'd love to play.